Hello and welcome back to Eat, Sleep, Boxing, Repeat. Delighted to be joined by Danny tonight to talk about two of the most active names in the boxing world. Um, with the Twitter beef that has literally recently appeared. Jake Paul and Tommy Fury. Now, me and Danny are here to discuss the ongoing saga that's burst into life again tonight. But firstly, Danny, how are you, mate?
All good, mate. All good. Very quiet Friday night for myself. Well, very quiet up until these two started going at it, and then it's all I saved on my Twitter, so I had to get on and talk about it, didn't we?
I completely agree with that. We needed to get on and talk about this. Now, it's been the beef that's been going on for a while, with Tommy Fury fighting in Abu Dhabi and Big John Fury getting in the ring, taking his top off, calling Jake Paul out, trying to get him in the ring. Now it appears it's not necessarily be a done deal, but we've seen Jake Paul recently say that he's basically calling Tommy Fury's bluff and said, "Okay, I'll come to the UK to fight you in the new year." And now again, we've seen from Tommy Fury, who has tweeted to essentially say he's ready to accept, get the contract signed, mentioning payments. Where the fight's going to be, etc. And obviously, Jake Paul has come back to call Tommy Fury out once again, call his bluff again, and basically say, "Your team will be paying you, just sign the contract." Firstly, on the back of that news, Danny, do you think the fight will actually happen?
I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to know. When like especially the likes of Jake Paul, Tommy Fury, when they say stuff like this, and obviously the stuff that came out after Dubai, that the verbal agreement was in place. Like how much of it has any substance to it, or how much is just sort of gusto and bravado when there's really not much intention of making a fight. I know the sort of rumblings that came out after the weekend was that we've agreed a date for the UK, and that's what sort of made me maybe a bit skeptical that the fight would happen. As much as Jake Paul coming over here would be massive, and we would certainly get some good numbers out of it. I'm not sure whether his backers in America, how happy they would be with him when him fighting not on American prime time. So that made me a bit skeptical. And then it's not even been a few days, and you're seeing these tweets of Fury saying for Jake Paul to sign it, and Jake Paul coming back with the sort of already sort of playing the politics, if you know what I say. So I don't know. As I said to you before, there's fights that make more sense if you're managing Jake Paul's career than Tommy Fury. Tommy Fury's a big name over here because he's obviously Tyson Fury's brother, the whole Love Island thing. But in the grand scheme of things, there's better opponents Jake Paul could fight in terms of name value who don't pose as much of a threat as Tommy Fury. Whatever you think of Fury's boxing ball, I think that's just a fact. Nate Diaz was one who sat ringside for the Paul Anderson Silva fight. He's a much bigger name globally than Tommy Fury, like far bigger. And I think a less difficult fight. So I don't know. I don't know if we do see it. I don't know how much of it's maybe Tommy trying to maybe build his star off Jake's name, and maybe Jake even trying to capitalize on Tommy's stature in the UK. But I've got my reservations. We'll put it that way.
Do you see the fight as potentially being a 50-50 fight? I mean, Tommy Fury's been professional for 3-4 years now, around that mark. He hasn't exactly made waves in the professional game. He had a couple of fights, took time out, went to Love Island, has come back, had the whole um, fight in Paul Bamba, apparently two different contracted weights, which I've never seen before in my time. And fighting a guy with a winning record, WBC Asia champion, 15-1, got 12 knockouts, but in an exhibition where I believe there was stuff in the contract to say they can't knock each other out, that type of thing. Um, Jake Paul, obviously, he's what, 6-0 now. He's fought Anderson Silva, Tyron Woodley, ex elite from combat sports, but obviously from mixed martial arts. So neither of them have exactly done much so far. Obviously, Tommy's got more the professional background in a sense. Do you see it as a 50-50 fight?
It's hard to say because there's like so many unknown variables. I
Mm.
think when speaking about Tommy Fury, there's a lot of stuff that make you think like, how seriously are you taking boxing here? The whole fallout from, as you mentioned, the Paul Bamba fight not happening. I mean, the missing weight by half a stone. I mean, I don't buy the whole two different weights in the
Mhm.
contract thing. Like that's surely, I know Global Titans aren't like top rank or whatever, but how can that happen? I don't know if I buy that. I think he's just misweight and accepted, oh, this fella needs the payday, so he'll accept whatever bullshit we feed him. And fair play to Paul Bamba for standing up to that.
Brilliant.
It's hard to say because Tommy Fury's obviously fought no one in terms of actual professional boxing fights. That last fella would be the best name on his record, but it's an exhibition fight. There was no winner crowned. It was 2 minute rounds. It's not on his professional record, so you obviously don't count that. And especially if you watch that fight, that wasn't a fight, like far
Yeah.
from it. And then you go down who's his best win. Like there was that Scottish fella, Jordan Grant, who I think went on to get knocked out in his last fight. And then you've got Anthony Taylor, Jake Paul's sparring partner. As you mentioned, though, in the same breath, it's hard to sort of say where Jake Paul's opponents
Mhm.
rank in terms of wins for a professional boxer because there's obviously journeymen that Tyron Woodley would beat. Anderson Silva's probably but the best credentials of them all, but 47 years old. How much ambition was he going in there when? So hard to say. I mean, I've always thought purely based on the eye test that Tommy Fury looks more of a boxer than Jake Paul. Maybe he just looks slightly more athletic. He looks a bit quicker. But Jake Paul's been grafting, for three and a half years now, boxing. He's been living the life of professional boxing. And if you put that much time into something, you're going to improve. And
Mhm.
people talk about Fury having the family name, but he's completely different, circumstances than Tyson. He wasn't boxing from 5, 6 years old. He got into the sport in his sort of mid to late teens, from what I understand, and obviously had a huge break from Love Island, and it's not as if he's been, living like Bernard Hopkins since then. There's been numerous reports of him being out and intoxicated and one thing or another in Manchester and not living how someone who was dedicated to getting to the top professional boxing would. So it's hard to say. I probably still would favour Fury, to be honest,
Mhm.
just trusting my own eye test, but nothing would surprise me in that fight.
I think when you look at it as well, obviously for Jake Paul, it's a win-win. If he wins, he's beat Tommy Fury. It's almost a grudge match, and he's got a professional boxer on his record who has got a winning record. Obviously debatable over the boxers he's faced, but it's still technically a winning record. If he loses, he's fought his first professional boxer. He goes back to the drawing board, fought a couple more, maybe influencers, over the hill MMA fighters, even a massively over the hill boxer. Um, so even for him, it's win-win. Even if he loses, he can go back to the drawing board, put some more time into it. He's only been a professional boxer for however many X amount of years, and he's got no amateur experience. For Tommy Fury, what do you see this as for Fury? Because I personally see it as it's a massive, massive risk. Um, where obviously if he loses, his career is in jeopardy. So how do you see this panning out for Fury? And do you think it's too big of a risk for him?
One thing I would say is I would definitely agree with you that Tommy's got a lot more to lose. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
it's necessarily win-win for Jake because I think if Jake does get beat, whether he decides to continue, that's on him. But I think a lot of the momentum behind that train and the sort of attention he's getting from maybe sort of traditional boxing media
Mm-hmm.
would fall off slightly. But as you say, Tommy definitely has much more to lose, but Tommy's got so much to gain as well. Um, if he beats Jake Paul, I mean, he's already grown in profile slightly in America, I would imagine, from having his name attached to Jake Paul. But if he was to beat Jake Paul, he becomes huge in America, huge,
Mm-hmm.
huge name in America. And it sort of depends what he wants. I think I don't know if going down the traditional route would serve Tommy Fury well. I think he would really need to knuckle down a lot more than he appears to do if he was going to have any success so focusing away from the influencer boxing and going down that area, English, Commonwealth, British, European route. And the financial rewards of influencer boxing would be so much greater than that. And as I said to you before, I think Tommy Fury would get found out before he reached any sort of level at all where he's making decent money if he was to fight sort of good domestic names. So I wouldn't begrudge him. I don't begrudge him for if he is chasing the Jake Paul fight. If he was to win that, fight KSI, fight Woodley, fight whoever, we can, it's easy for us as boxing fans to say like, oh, why are you doing this? But put yourself in that situation. If you're offered easier fights, less risk to your health for 10 times the money, you'd be a fool not to do it. You'd be an idiot not to do it. And one example I mentioned before was Hasim Rahman Jr.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
fought Tommy Morrison's son, maybe 6 months ago, maybe not even that. Stopped maybe the fifth, sixth round. Didn't even
Ironed out,
fight.
by the way.
Yeah. Ironed out, gassed out, and got ironed out. Didn't even fight Jake Paul. Didn't even fight him. Fight never even happened. Was signed to fight him. The fight fell through. And look at him now. Look at his profile
Mm.
now. I couldn't tell you what Tommy Morrison's son doing. By all accounts, he's a sort of an average prospect. They've maybe got hopes of making some sort of ticket seller out of him, but I would already be very confident that Sam Ratman Jr. will make more in the rest of his career than what Tommy Morrison's son Jr. purely from being attached to Jake Paul. He's obviously fighting this weekend against a former UFC fighter who he'll beat. He'll headline more of those influencer boxing shows and, make a fortune. So whether we like it or not, like that's if you're a sort of average fighter and you can get a bit of clout attached to your name, that's the way to
Mm.
go. So yeah, it's interesting.
I completely agree with your points there. I think if Tommy had shown a bit more ability, if he was running
Mm.
through the opponent's face, then the boxing purists maybe carrying the Fury name, regardless of the Love Island side of things, would have gone down slightly differently. I think it would have ruffled a few more feathers, but from the ability we've seen, um, I wouldn't see him past Commonwealth level if he could even win a Commonwealth title. Who knows? If he knuckles down, you never know. He might go to win some decent titles in his career. But at present, I think even Commonwealth level sort of reaching for the stars a bit. Um, but yeah, basically based off what he's shown, I think if he went for the influencer route, fighting your Jake Pauls, your KSIs, um, Anderson Silvers, people like that, I don't think people would begrudge him too much. I think it's almost an expectation now. So
Yeah.
it's more of a case of not being annoyed by it and not thinking, oh, why the fuck's he doing that type thing, but more it's we expect him to do that. And again, like you say, it's probably the better route for him. He'll earn more money, less chance of getting hurt. He goes home safe to his family, and his bank account will be loaded. But only time will tell. Only time will tell again if the fight actually gets made. This has been talked about for months and months now. They had an agreed fight. I mean, Tommy's got a bit of a history of pulling out, for his fractured ribs, being overweight. I think it's 3 or 4 times now we're looking at that Tommy Fury's pulled out of fights. But they seem to be going at it on Twitter. Big John Fury is getting involved. It won't be long before I'm sure Tyson puts his 50p in. And then I think we'll see KSI put his 50p in. So it's a bit of a circus. I think the only way we get around that is by actually seeing contracts signed and the fight happening. But it's good for the UK. He'll probably sell out, make a lot of money. It's just one of those again. Time will tell. I know we're seeing it with even in the elite pro ranks with your Spence and Crawfords that they're struggling to get fights made, and we're seeing contract disputes over that. But nonetheless, it's hot news at the moment. Really, it's big news in the boxing world. But Danny, thank you for joining me to discuss that. Hopefully, over the coming days and weeks, we'll actually see a fight announced, and then we can move forward from there.
Fingers crossed, mate. Thank you very much.
Nice one. Thank you for watching, guys.